There is a specific psychological anomaly that haunts the Oval Office. A quiet, invisible defect. It is the ability to look a grieving mother in the eye and feel absolute silence. It is the capacity to order a drone strike that ends a dozen lives, then sit down to dinner without a pulse rising a single beat. History calls this strength. Clinical psychology calls it something else entirely. Take Lyndon B. Johnson. He didn't just lead, he consumed. He would corner men in the Senate, pressing his body against theirs until they leaned back in terror, smelling his breath, feeling his dominance. He forced aides to take notes while he sat on the toilet with the door wide open. We call this bad behaviour. But in 2012, psychologists at Emory University found that this wasn't just a quirk. They conducted a retroactive analysis of 42 US presidents. They stripped away the politics, the parties, and the speeches. They looked at the wiring underneath. Now you might think I'm talking about narcissism. I'm not. That is too simple. Every politician is a narcissist. They found something far more dangerous. A biological anomaly called fearless dominance. It is the exact same trait found in the minds of serial killers. And here is the tell. Watch their eyes. In a high-stress situation, a debate, a crisis, a press conference, a normal human being blinks more frequently. It is a startle reflex. The brain is scanning for danger. But look closely at the most successful presidents. In the middle of the firestorm, their blink rate often slows down. They enter a reptilian state of total calm. The terrifying part? We didn't vote for them despite this defect. We likely voted for them because of it. But this story isn't just about the men in the White House. It is about the terrifying paradox of power itself. Because to sit in that chair, to hold the weight of the world in your hands, you cannot be a normal human being. You have to be something else. Psychologists have a term for this archetype, the successful psychopath. It sounds like an accusation, but it is really just a diagnosis of architecture. Unlike the criminal, whose lack of fear destroys them, the president uses their absence of fear to build an empire. To understand this, you have to look at the mechanics of the brain. In a normal human, the amygdala is the alarm bell. It sits deep in the temporal lobe. It screams when we face danger, social rejection, or moral conflict. It floods the body with cortisol. It forces us to care. But for these men, the alarm bell has been muffled. Let's look at Milwaukee, 1912. Theodore Roosevelt is walking to a podium to give a speech. A man steps out of the crowd and shoots him in the chest at point-blank range. The bullet lodges between his ribs. A normal human being has a biological panic response. You collapse, you scream, you seek safety. Roosevelt didn't seek safety. He coughed into his hand, saw blood, realised the bullet hadn't punctured his lung, and then, with the bullet still inside him, proceeded to deliver a 90-minute speech. We call this heroism. But neurologically, it is an anomaly. It is a failure of the fear response. They move through the world with a biological immunity to anxiety. When the crisis hits, when the war room is shouting, when the economy collapses, when the world is on fire, everyone else is paralysed by the heat. But the president? They just feel cool. They possess cognitive empathy, but they lack its emotional twin. They know the words for sadness. They know the geometry of grief. They can hand a widow a folded flag at Arlington with perfect precision. But inside, they are merely observing. They are astronauts drifting in the dark, watching the Earth turn through a thick pane of glass. This detachment is their superpower. It allows them to be the surgeon who cuts into the beating heart of a nation. It allows them to send 18-year-olds to war without losing sleep. It allows them to be the architect, cutting away the messy, human parts of connection to ensure the survival of the state. We admire them for this. We call them stoic. We call them rocks. But we do not see the tragedy of the rock. We do not realise that the rock feels nothing. If they feel nothing, how do they convince millions of people that they care? This is where the defect becomes an art form. Because they lack the raw data of emotion, they have to learn it like a second language. They become anthropologists of the human soul. Watch a president interact with a crowd. It is a masterclass in the simulation of sanity. They have studied the micro-expressions of warmth. They know exactly how long to hold a handshake to convey sincerity. 3 seconds. They know that a slight tilt of the head signals listening. They know that lowering the pitch of their voice signals authority. For you, these are automatic reactions. For them, these are manual calculations. They are running a high-level algorithm. If X happens, display emotion Y. This requires an immense amount of cognitive energy, a phenomenon psychologists call masking. And it works. It works so well that we fall in love with them. We project our own hopes and dreams onto them. We see a father figure. We see a savior. But we are looking at a mirror. They are reflecting our own emotions back at us, amplified and perfected, while they remain hollow inside. And this hollowness is necessary. Imagine if they actually felt the weight of their decisions. Imagine if a president felt the individual grief of every soldier lost, every family bankrupt, every life altered by their signature. They would collapse. The cognitive load would shatter a normal mind in a week. To survive the presidency, you must undergo a psychological amputation. You must sever the connection between action and guilt. They are not pretending to be strong. They are pretending to be human. But what is the price of a heart that does not tremble? If fearless dominance is the engine that drives the presidency, alexithymia is the exhaust that poisons the air. It literally translates to no words for emotions. These men have spent a lifetime valuing logic over feeling. And in doing so, they have let their emotional limbs atrophy. They do not repress their feelings, they delete them before they even arrive. And the cost is a profound, crushing isolation. Consider the nature of their daily life. Every handshake is strategic. Every smile is calibrated for a lens. They are never off stage. This creates a fracture in the soul known as the imposter paradox. They fear that if the public saw the coldness inside, if we saw how they calculate relationships like transactions, how they can detach from a crisis in a heartbeat, how they view their own cabinet members as chess pieces, we would recoil. They know they are performing. They are the lead actor in a play that never ends. It is not a physical loneliness. They are surrounded by staff, by admirers, by the Secret Service. But they are experiencing existential isolation. Because no one actually knows them. The public knows the mask, the staff knows the boss, the family knows the provider. But almost no one knows the man who sits alone in the treaty room at 2 a.m. staring at the wall, feeling the eerie silence of a mind that cannot connect. They look at the data from that Emory study. They see the line drawn between presidents and killers, and in the quiet of the executive residence when the cameras are finally off, they must wonder, am I one of them? So they perform warmth, they mimic the human experience. They become the president of a country with a population of 1. How does a human being become this way? They were not born machines. While the genetic wiring for high tolerance, that slow blink rate that dampened amygdala, was there. The switch was flipped by a lesson learned too young. Psychologists call it instrumentalization. Somewhere in the quiet history of their childhoods, long before the polls or the primaries, a bargain was made. They learned that they were not valued for who they were. They were valued for what they did. Perhaps they were the golden child, the fixer, the one who carried the family's hope. They learned that affection was not a birthright. It was a paycheck. It was transactional. They learned that needs were a liability, and competence was the only currency that bought safety. They learned that to be loved by the crowd, they had to turn off the messy, weeping parts of their soul. and become a tool. This is the narcissistic injury at the core of every great leader. A deep unconscious belief that they are not enough on their own, that they must build a monument to themselves, a legacy, a policy, a presidency, just to justify their existence. So they adopted the dark triad as a shield. Narcissism whispered, "I am special, so I can fix this." Machiavellianism whispered, "I will control the outcome so the country is never hurt." Fearlessness became their armour, and we, the voters, applauded them. We tell our children to be kind, but we vote for the ruthless. The world loves a tool that works. We rewarded the mask. We gave them the applause, the votes, the power. And so year after year, the mask fused to their skin. They won the game, but they forgot that they were the ones playing it. But here is the uncomfortable truth, the twist in the knife. They are not evil. They are simply over-indexed. The traits they carry, that coldness, that dominance, that terrifying ability to compartmentalize, they are neutral. They are tools. A scalpel in the hands of a murderer is a weapon. A scalpel in the hands of a surgeon is a miracle. And we must admit our own role in this. We have asked them to hold the scalpel. We claim we want a president who is relatable. We say we want a nice guy to have a beer with. But deep down, in the lizard brain of the electorate, we know the world is a chaotic, dangerous place. We don't actually want a nice person protecting us from it. We want a monster. We want the sheepdog who has the teeth of the wolf. We want someone who can suspend their humanity. Someone who can be ruthless. Someone who can be a successful psychopath on our behalf. We have asked them to cut themselves off from the human race so that they can make the decisions we are too afraid to make. They have welded the gate shut. They have sacrificed their own humanity to become the avatar of the state. They have dropped the delusion of omnipotence only to pick up the burden of total responsibility. They have turned the weapon outward, using their strategic minds to navigate the chaos, using their fearlessness to speak when others are trembling. They have become the surgeon, but they have lost the ability to be the patient. The trait every president hides is not psychopathy. It is humanity. They hide it because they believe we will see it as weakness. They have built a magnificent fortress to keep the pain out, and it has worked. They are safe, but they are starving inside the walls. The greatest leaders in history and the most whole human beings are not the ones who feel nothing. They are the ones who feel everything, the ones who carry the terrible weight of the world and yet choose to move forward anyway. That is true fearlessness. It is easy to be cold. It is easy to be a statue. It is incredibly difficult to be a living, breathing human being in a job that demands you be a machine. Perhaps when they leave the office, when the Secret Service leaves, when the phone stops ringing, perhaps then they can lower the drawbridge. But until then, power without connection isn't leadership. It's just lonely.